The morning light spilled through stained glass in trembling color, brushing the dust like drifting prayer. Evelyn stood at the edge of the altar, tracing the lines of the old floor where the tiles had begun to crack. Beneath the hymns of sparrows and distant bells, a hollow echo answered every step. Father Corin watched her in silence, the faint scent of frankincense still lingering from dawn service. When the first tile lifted, the air changed. Cooler, older, breathing in a way stone should not breathe. "There's something hollow here," Evelyn whispered. The echo returned, her voice softer, as if imitating her. A narrow stair revealed itself, chiseled straight into darkness. Father Corin made the sign of the cross, though his hand trembled slightly. "Perhaps," he murmured, "it was never meant to be found." Evelyn glanced down the black descent, her heart strangely calm. What if the earth remembers the faces that time forgot? The stair spiraled downward, swallowing the last breath of sunlight. Evelyn's lantern quivered in her hand, its glow brushing the wet walls. Father Corin followed, his voice echoing softly as he read an old prayer. Jonas brought up the rear, footsteps hesitant, eyes darting at every drip of stone. The air grew colder, not just in temperature, but in memory, as if it had waited centuries for their return. At the base, the path widened into a chamber. The walls shimmered faintly, as though touched by moisture or reflection. Evelyn lifted her light higher, and faces emerged, not painted or sculpted, but carved directly into the stone. Hundreds of them, each mouth open in silent pleading. Jonas stumbled back, muttering a prayer too old for memory. The carved faces stretched from floor to ceiling, their features distinct: sorrow, terror, calm surrender. Evelyn reached out, her fingertips trembling just before the nearest cheek, feeling warmth where there should have been stone. "They're not sculptures," she breathed. "They're impressions." Father Corin's voice quivered. "Of what?" Her answer came not in words, but in the faintest movement. One face shifted, its stone lips twitching as though trying to form a name. The silence deepened until it seemed alive. Every whisper, every heartbeat, echoed from the stone mouths. Evelyn knelt, brushing dust from the floor. Symbols spiraled outward from the center, ancient letters woven between faces. "It's a prayer," she murmured, tracing the grooves. "Or a warning." Father Corin knelt beside her, his candlelight shaking. "Then why hide it?" he asked. "Why bury a prayer beneath the altar?" Jonas' voice cracked behind them. "Because maybe it wasn't a prayer at all." The carvings seemed to breathe, their shadows stretching longer as the lanterns dimmed. Evelyn stepped toward the far wall where one figure stood apart, a woman's face, serene amid the other's anguish. Her stone eyes glimmered faintly, like wet glass. She whispered before she knew she had spoken, "I've seen her before." Father Corin turned sharply. "In a dream?" Evelyn asked. The air stirred, and from deep within the stone came a sigh so soft it could have been mistaken for her own. By nightfall, the church above felt lighter, though none of them could name why. Evelyn sat alone by the stair's edge, sketching the faces from memory, her pencil trembling at every remembered detail. Father Corin moved quietly through the pews, whispering to the silence as though asking forgiveness. Jonas refused to go home. He lingered near the tools, eyes fixed on the altar. "It felt like they were breathing," he said softly. Evelyn looked up, her voice barely more than air. Maybe they were. Outside, a storm gathered. Soft thunder rolling like a slow heartbeat. From beneath the floor came the faintest sound of stone shifting, as if hundreds of lips moved in the dark, whispering her name. When they descended again, the air felt heavier, as though each breath belonged to someone else first. Moisture clung to the walls, and the carvings glistened faintly, like living skin. Evelyn lifted her lantern close, studying the serene woman's face again. Beneath the dust, she noticed small channels carved around the mouth, Thin grooves leading downward like veins. It's not art, she whispered. Father Corin's candle flickered. Then what is it? Jonas stepped backward, his boots striking hollow stone, and a faint moan rose from beneath the floor. Evelyn cleared away dust with trembling fingers, revealing the slab Jonas had struck. It bore the faint outline of a door, sealed with rusted bolts. There's more, she breathed. Father Corin hesitated, his voice thin with unease. Some doors stay closed for mercy, but Evelyn was already at work, chisel striking slow, careful notes that echoed like distant bells. The final bolt gave, and a draft swept through the chamber, carrying with it a soft humming, not from wind, but from below, as though hundreds of unseen throats hummed the same low tune. The hidden door sank open with a sigh, revealing a narrow passage sloping deeper into the earth. The air shimmered faintly, scented of salt and stone. Evelyn stepped forward, lantern high, her heartbeat slowing as she felt an inexplicable pull, not of curiosity, but of recognition. It's calling, she said softly. Father Corin swallowed, whispering, Then it knows your name. Jonas refused to follow, his voice cracking as he begged them to stop. But Evelyn was already walking into the dark, her shadow swallowed by something that breathed before she did. The passage curved into a small antechamber, round, smooth, and alive with faint vibrations. The sound that filled it was not voice, but resonance, like the heartbeat of the stone itself. Evelyn reached the center and froze. Embedded in the wall was a hollow cavity, shaped exactly like a human body, arms raised, mouth open. Inside, something faintly glowed, a pale film of light, pulsing gently. She touched the edge, and the glow brightened, spreading outward like veins awakening. Father Corin called her name, but she didn't turn. The walls had begun to whisper again, and now the carved faces above whispered too. The light pulsed gently, steady as breath. Evelyn stood motionless, her hands still upon the wall, warmth seeping into her skin. It wasn't heat, it was memory. Images flickered in her mind, the church above, its foundations still new, the sound of distant singing. She saw faces, the same ones carved into the chamber, but alive, standing in torchlight, their mouths moving in silent unison. She stumbled back, gasping softly. Father Corin rushed forward, his candle guttering. What did you see? He asked. Them, she whispered. When they were still, praying, her words trembled with awe, not fear. The stone no longer seemed lifeless. It seemed to be waiting. Later, they gathered at the church's altar, the lanterns extinguished save for one. The storm outside pressed against the walls, whispering like surf. Evelyn unrolled her sketches, now filled with faces that seemed subtly different, more awake, more real. Father Corin traced one with his finger. They pray to be remembered, he murmured. But memory can be a curse. Jonas sat apart, eyes fixed on the stair. If they're awake, he said quietly. What do they want? No one answered. Beneath the floor, something sighed again. Not sorrowful, not angry, but yearning. When sleep finally claimed Evelyn, she dreamed she was beneath the church again. But this time the carvings were gone. Instead, hundreds of people stood shoulder to shoulder in candlelight, faces familiar and full of peace. The serene woman stood at their center, eyes open, smiling faintly. You found us, she said. Now finish what we began. Evelyn woke to the toll of the morning bell and the faint taste of salt on her lips. Outside, fog clung to the hill. Father Corin sat nearby, rosary still in hand, watching her silently as though he'd been awake all night. The next descent felt almost peaceful. The chamber glowed faintly even before they reached it, as though responding to her return. The carved faces now seemed less anguished, their stones softened by the light that pulsed from within. Evelyn approached the woman's likeness again and whispered, What do you want me to see? A single flake of stone loosened near the mouth and drifted to the floor, revealing a hollow cavity behind it. Within lay a small bronze object, dull and cold, a pendant shaped like a sun. Father Corin stared in disbelief. That symbol hasn't been used in centuries. Evelyn turned it in her hand. It was warm. As the pendant rested in Evelyn's hand, the air vibrated again. A soft, harmonic hum that filled the entire chamber. Dust lifted from the carvings, drifting like pale fireflies. Each face seemed to exhale, releasing something invisible yet heavy. Jonas fell to his knees, clutching his head. Father Corin whispered through trembling lips, "They're waking." Evelyn's gaze lifted, calm and certain now. "No," she said, her voice steady. "They're remembering." The light gathered around her like mist, pulsing with every heartbeat, until it was impossible to tell whether it came from the stone or from her. The morning after, the church stood quiet beneath a pale gray sky. Evelyn sat near the altar, the pendant resting on her palm, its bronze glinting softly, even without light. Father Corin paced before the cracked, stained glass, his voice low and strained. "This was never meant for us to find," he said. Evelyn looked up slowly. "Then why did it call to us?" Outside, the fog thickened, pressing against the doors like a living thing. Jonas watched through the window, whispering, "They're waiting." None of them asked who. The air was filled with the kind of silence that feels like listening. They returned below as the fog thickened. The chamber no longer looked ancient. It pulsed faintly like a living heart. Every surface shimmered with thin veins of light, tracing the carvings like nerves. Evelyn held the pendant forward, and the glow followed her movement, pulsing in time with her breath. "It's responding," she whispered. Father Corin's voice cracked. "Responding to what?" She turned, eyes shining softly. "To us." The moment the words left her lips, every carved face turned toward her. Hundreds of silent eyes reflecting gold. The air trembled with soundless motion. Evelyn stepped closer to the wall, her breath slow. Eyes locked on the serene woman's face. "You're not trapped," she whispered. "You're waiting for someone to listen." The stone flickered with light that pulsed in rhythm to her words. Father Corin dropped to his knees, his faith unraveling into awe. "If these are prayers," he said softly, "then who were they praying to?" Evelyn's answer came like a sigh. "To each other." As she spoke, the walls brightened, the faces softening, expressions turning from fear to peace. A congregation of memory, remembering itself. The pendant in Evelyn's hand began to hum, soft and low, vibrating like a note sustained by invisible strings. She pressed it gently to the wall, and the stone opened in thin lines of gold, revealing a small recess behind the carvings. Inside lay fragments of parchment, dried, blackened, yet intact. Father Corin lifted one carefully, his eyes narrowing. "It's a litany," he whispered. "A prayer written for the earth itself." Jonas frowned. "For the earth?" Evelyn smiled faintly. Maybe they weren't praying to God. Maybe they were praying to time. As the litany was read aloud, the light within the chamber softened to a steady living warmth. Each word echoed not as sound, but as resonance, a vibration that filled their bones, the air, the walls. Evelyn closed her eyes, feeling the rhythm in her pulse. Father Corin's voice broke midway, his faith and doubt entwined in tears. The last line was little more than a whisper. "We prayed to remember what the world forgot." And with that, the glow receded, fading gently until only the faintest trace remained in the pendant's heart. The silence that followed was not emptiness, it was peace. That night, the hill slept under silver rain. The church bell remained still, yet the air seemed to hum softly with an echo that didn't belong to wind or thunder. Evelyn sat near the altar again, the pendant resting on the wooden rail, watching how the candlelight caught within it. Father Corin joined her quietly, his expression unreadable. "It's no longer our mystery," he said. "It belongs to them." Evelyn smiled faintly. Maybe it always did. Outside, lightning shimmered across the fog, and for a heartbeat, the stained glass windows glowed from within, as though the faces below were shining through the floor. By dawn, the fog had thickened to a veil. The villagers below the hill spoke of music, soft and wordless, drifting from the church before sunrise. Evelyn, still sleepless, stood outside with Father Corin as pale light broke through the mist. "They'll come asking questions," he said quietly. "Let them," she replied. "Maybe it's time someone listened." Jonas emerged behind them, eyes weary but calm. "It's not just echoes down there," he murmured. "It's something alive." Evelyn turned toward the soundless church doors, the pendant warm against her chest. "Alive," she whispered, or remembering how to be inside the chamber. The carvings had changed again. Their mouths were closed now, their expressions softened into rest. The air carried a deep calm, the kind that follows forgiveness. Evelyn traced her hand across the serene woman's cheek. Cool now, lifeless again. "They're gone," she said quietly. Father Corin shook his head. "No, they've been hurt." The pendant pulsed once more, faintly, then dimmed completely, its work complete. Jonas placed a lantern at the center of the room, bowing his head. "Then this is their church now?" Evelyn smiled softly. "Maybe it always was." That evening, Father Corin gathered his final sermon notes, though he wrote no words. He simply left the parchment blank and placed it upon the altar, beneath the pendant. When Evelyn saw, she understood. Some truths could not be written, only felt. The three of them sat in silence as sunlight dimmed through colored glass, bathing the floor in red and gold. For the first time, the church didn't feel empty. The silence was whole, filled with presence. Evelyn closed her eyes, and in that stillness she thought she heard the faintest sigh, a sound of peace, not sorrow. When night returned, Evelyn stood once more at the stair. She didn't descend, only listened to the faint trickle of water below, the heartbeat of the stone, the whisper of memory fading into sleep. The pendant lay upon the altar behind her, still and dark. "Rest," she whispered into the quiet, unsure if the words were for them or for herself. A final gust of wind swept through the church, snuffing the candles in one soft breath. And in that darkness, for a moment brief as blinking, the air shimmered with light, like a memory saying goodbye. The following days passed like mist, soft and half-remembered. No one spoke of what had happened beneath the church, yet each of them carried its echo differently. Evelyn spent her mornings at the hill's edge, watching fog curl over the valley. She could still feel the hum in her chest sometimes, faint, like a forgotten heartbeat. Father Corin no longer preached. Instead, he tended the candles, lighting them without prayer, only silence. Jonas returned to his work, though he often paused mid-task, head tilted as if listening. The town below spoke of calm weather, of restful dreams, and of bells that rang only in their sleep. One evening, Evelyn descended once more, lantern in hand, driven not by fear or duty but by longing. The air below was still and dry now, the carvings dull and quiet, their light extinguished. She knelt before the serene woman's face, tracing the lines with her fingertips. The stone felt smooth and warm, like skin that had only just gone cold. "Thank you," she whispered. A faint breath stirred the dust, not enough to move it, but enough for her to feel seen. As she turned to leave, a single echo followed her, her own voice returning, softer, slower. "Thank you." Above, Father Corin stood by the altar, reading the ancient parchment once more by candlelight. Though the letters had begun to fade, he found he no longer needed to see them to remember. Each line was etched within him, a prayer not to a god, but to belonging. He looked toward the stair, his lips moving in silence. When Evelyn emerged, he smiled. "It's quiet now," she said. "Peaceful?" He nodded. "Peace has a sound. We just forget how to hear it." The bell tower above them gave a soft, accidental chime as if agreeing. Jonas dreamed of the faces that night. Not carved, not stone, but alive, gathered in a field of light. They smiled at him, unafraid. One reached out, touching his shoulder, and whispered something he didn't understand. When he awoke, he found tears on his cheeks and an odd calm in his chest. He rose before dawn, climbing the hill to the church, where he found Evelyn and Father Corin already waiting. None of them spoke. Together they listened to the faint wind moving through the steeple, carrying a sound that might have been music, or might have been memory. The fog lifted one final time, revealing the valley in clear morning light. The church looked unchanged, though something about it felt lighter, as if the air itself remembered how to breathe. Evelyn placed her hand on the stone wall, whispering, "You can rest now." Father Corin smiled quietly, turning the pendant over in his palm before setting it into the earth beneath the altar. Jonas lowered his lantern beside it, letting the light fade naturally. For a long moment, none of them moved. Then Evelyn spoke, barely above a whisper. "Maybe every prayer is just the world trying to remember itself." Weeks passed. The villagers still came to the hill on Sundays, though few spoke of the light that had once risen from beneath the altar. Evelyn stayed longer than she had planned, tending to the church garden, planting wildflowers where the ground had cracked. Father Corin's sermons grew gentler, filled with pauses instead of certainty. Jonas repaired the old bell rope, letting it ring only when wind tugged it on its own. And sometimes when the last candle flickered out, they felt it again. That faint hum in the air, like a memory breathing through stone. Content at last. One afternoon, Evelyn wandered down the slope beyond the church, following the stream that wound through the valley. The water murmured softly, its rhythm familiar. Kneeling, she touched its surface and felt the same quiet pulse she had felt in the chamber. "You found your way back," she whispered. The breeze carried the scent of stone and rain. When she looked up, she thought she saw faint reflections, not of faces, but of light, drifting within the current, flowing toward the open fields. She smiled, understanding without words that not all prayers stay in one place. Father Corin spent his evenings writing by candlelight, not sermons, but fragments of thoughts. "Faith," he wrote, "is not the search for answers, but the willingness to listen when nothing speaks." When he was done, he closed the book and left it on the pew, its pages smelling faintly of wax and smoke. He looked once more toward the altar where the pendant now lay buried and whispered, "Amen." Outside, the bell moved gently on its own, ringing a single note that faded into dusk. Jonas left a week later, returning to the village below. Yet even as he worked the fields, he found himself pausing at dusk, listening for echoes carried down the hill. Sometimes when the wind was right, he thought he heard faint voices, not of sorrow, but of laughter and distant song. And each time he smiled, knowing that the chamber's quiet had become part of the living world again, its song now woven through the soil, the rain, the stone beneath his feet. When night finally came, Evelyn stood one last time inside the church. The air was cool, filled with the soft scent of dust and lilies. She traced her hand along the wall, where the first crack had been found. It was smooth now, whole again. The candlelight flickered, and for a heartbeat, the faces seemed to shimmer faintly beneath the surface, as if smiling. "Rest well," she whispered. Then she stepped outside into the silver quiet of the hilltop night. The moon hung above, gentle and full, and somewhere far below, the stream carried its song. "Who are we?" she wondered. In the silence that remembers us.